Hello YouTube, and welcome to another Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we're not really talking about any lore topic in particular, but rather we're talking about why certain topics are very hard to talk about. As such, it might be a bit of a different video than usual, but I feel like this video is very necessary, and for some people it might be necessary to understand some of the challenges in interpreting Elder Scrolls lore. If this kind of video isn't your thing, I suggest returning next week when we once again talk about a single lore topic. That said, let's begin. Alright, so the premise of this video is to illustrate why it can be hard to talk about some lore topics. This problem applies broadly to the Elder Scrolls series and there are many examples of it, but I will be illustrating it through the lore and world building of 4th era Tamriel, so the setting of Skyrim, Elder Scrolls Blades and most of Elder Scrolls Legends. This is because this is just the most familiar topic for most of my viewers. The problem I'm talking about is the lack of information in key sectors needed for world building, lore interpretation and role-playing for those people interested in that sort of thing. This problem often leads to disagreements over interpretations of lore, where in my opinion this disagreement shouldn't be. Just to be clear, I'm not against disagreements, I'm just saying that they shouldn't be in these specific areas, and I'm talking about the areas of knowledge of the world which would be obvious to any citizen of Tamriel. The best example of this is the state of Morrowind in the 4th era. Is it part of the Empire, or isn't it? It's being kept intentionally vague by Bethesda in lore, where it's never truly confirmed whether Morrowind is neither in or out of the Empire. To us, it's a mystery and subject to immense speculation online, while any citizens of Tamriel, to them it's simply common knowledge of how Morrowind is doing and what political status on Tamriel it has. Speculation on this topic is not trying to speculate the future or speculate motivations behind someone or something. It's speculation over something that, if you were to live in Tamriel, it would simply be a given fact to you. And in my opinion, this is where the Elder Scrolls very much falls short at times, as something like this makes it harder to hold discussions that I think are worth having on Tamriel's status, and at the same time makes immersion into the world, and to an extent role-playing your character by, for example, letting them meet from Morrowind, harder, as you don't know what's going on there. I'm not talking about wanting to have the exact details of the situation, but I just wish that they would finish the world building and let us at least know what the political situation on Tamriel is, so we can properly discuss it and speculate on it. This is essentially just the foundation to the world missing and just standing in the way of an informed discussion. Another area this is very apparent in is the White Gold Concordat. For all the talk about it as it being the treaty that ended the war and in a way instigated the Stormcloak Rebellion, we never get to see its exact terms or the terms in general. As we know, it did a few things, like banning the worship of Talos, the outlaw of the Blades and so on. Based on that information we do all our speculation, but we aren't getting the full picture, as we have reason to assume that the White Gold Concordat contained far more clauses than just those clauses. For example, we know that the Altmerry Dominion retreated from southern Cyrodiil after the war, which they had occupied. So that had to be in the treaty, and yet it never gets mentioned when we talk about the treaty. In addition to that, something that I have speculated and that I've faced a lot of criticism over, is that more than likely the Altmerry Dominion had to pay war reparations to the Empire after the war, as part of the White Gold Concordat's terms. I speculated this at the time on the fact that the Empire was extremely poor when the war ended, and for some reason it gave the Jarls of Skyrim chests of gold after the White Gold Concordat to rebuild. The only logical conclusion to me then seemed that the Altmerry Dominion must have paid the Empire war reparations as part of the Concordat, which is then gold that the Empire could give to its provinces to rebuild. But as I said, I faced heavy criticism on that, and while some of that is valid criticism, and the reasoning is also valid, my point still stands, and to this day it hasn't been disproven because it can't be disproven. The same goes for the exact mandate that the Thalmor Justiciars have. Are they only allowed to have free reign in problem areas like Skyrim, where there's a rebellion over the worship of Talos, or are they just allowed to go everywhere within the Empire? A lot of dialogue suggests that the Thalmor weren't in Skyrim before Ulfric started making a fuss about Talos, and that for a long time everyone just worshipped unofficially without reprimand. And that as soon as Ulfric began to force worship to become officially allowed, only then were the Thalmor allowed to step in due to treaty terms, as the Empire couldn't enforce it themselves, which would be very logical, as that's how most international treaties work. If a party that has to enforce it is no longer able to, only then does the adversary step in. But then there's also dialogue pointing to the exact opposite, leaving us in speculation to what would be very common knowledge to any citizen of Tamriel. While any citizen in Tamriel would be able to find the exact terms, we can't. I mean, it would have been so easy for Bethesda to just place a copy of the Concordat in the Talmor embassy, as they have to enforce the thing in the first place, but Bethesda just decided to keep it vague and keep the terms out. This is, in my opinion, just lackluster world building, as it doesn't give us the framework or foundation to hold a discussion on. Rather, it has us discussion on what the framework looks like, while if you actually lived in that world, that framework would be obvious and would be common knowledge. This is a limit that makes Elder Scrolls lore both very fun, but also extremely frustrating, as we have to speculate on the world building foundation on which we would normally be able to hold our discussion in our real world. Not everything that is unknown suffers from this, of course, but I think that a good rule of thumb is to think, would an average citizen of Tamriel know this, or be able to easily find it out by, for example, looking in books or asking people? For example, the exact strength of the Imperial Legion at the border with the Altmerry Dominion, an average citizen wouldn't know that, as the Empire would probably want to keep it secret to some degree. But whether or not Morrowind is part of the fucking country you live in, that would be common knowledge. There are so many of these problems and limits to work with. This very video was sparked by, among others, comments of people claiming that I am completely wrong in my speculation and that I have a completely different interpretation of the foundation on which to base the discussion. Of course, not worded like that, but that's how I paraphrase it. And that is fully possible and very viable. The problem here is, however, that neither me nor you is wrong. The problem is that Bethesda didn't finish their world building, and thus we aren't able to discuss our speculation with a common foundation. This leading to completely different conclusions for the both of us. This is part of the reasoning that my arguments can be so long in certain videos, because I first need to explain the entire foundation my argument is built on, as that foundation is also built upon speculation and is subject to change. This can be fun at times, and at least for me it makes speculation a lot more fun most of the time, but it does lead to a lot of discussions where you simply cannot debate the people that you want to debate, because both of you are working with completely different but both viable senses of foundation, leading you to debate the foundation rather than your actual speculation, while the foundation should have been common knowledge from the start. But it can't be, because you can't find it out. Anyway, this was something that I really wanted to get off my chest, since I've been preaching this to people in direct messages for a long time, and it's always a problem when trying to discuss Elder Scrolls lore, which is one of my favorite things to do, but when you don't work with the same common foundation, you go and discuss the foundation instead of discuss your arguments. So, that's why I made a video about it. That said, we have reached the end of this video. I'm genuinely very curious to think what you all think of this topic, and let me know what your opinions and feelings towards it are, so please let me know in the comments. My English is suffering. Before I end things, allow me to thank my top patrons, Mr. Bernardo Binda, Metaloid1v1, Gabriel Binda, Hammer of the Scots, Mr. Christmas and Mr. Para. These people, along with all the others on screen, make my weekly lore videos possible, and for that I'm very grateful. With that behind us, I hope to see you in the next week when we once again talk about the regular, safe lore topic. See you later.